Fears of the coronavirus escalating in the U.S., now hitting King County in Washington. This is the county where Seattle is, and now they're asking 2.2 million residents to work from home. They're pulling out 22,000 students. They're shutting down schools. They're asking people over 60 to stay indoors. Begun the soft quarantine has. Videos are emerging on social media of hand sanitizer and bleach and products being raided from stores. We have seen stories popping up. It really seems like Washington is getting hit hard, and it's mostly because a nursing home got infected. And this is the worst hit state in the United States. So I don't know when or if we'll ever get to a hard quarantine point, but we've already seen in New York and Massachusetts, the state government's asking people to voluntarily quarantine themselves. That's where we're at now in Washington, but they are asking 2.2 million people this time. This is when it starts getting big. Now, earlier, Donald Trump gave a statement. It may have been, I think it was this morning. It may have been I think it was last night, actually. And he said, a lot of people who get this don't even know they have it. They go about their business. They go to work. Everything's fine. They recover. That's all true. Now, of course, people in the media tried saying Trump said it's okay to go to work if you're sick. He never said that. He said some people who have had it didn't know and then went to work. But I don't want to get into the politics. Maybe not just yet. First, let's take a look at what's actually going on with this story. Daily Mail reports Washington County with 9 coronavirus deaths urges all 2.2 million residents to work from home, pulls 22,000 students from school, and tells everyone over 60 to stay indoors. State officials warn primary voters not to lick their ballots. Do they mean like lick the envelopes? I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like if you got it in the mail, I guess don't lick it. Residents of Washington County, where 44 people have tested positive for coronavirus and 9 people have died, are being advised to work from home, and schools are shutting down to avoid possible exposure to the killer strain. 11 people in the U.S. have died from coronavirus, and 165 people have tested positive nationwide. Washington State has been at the epicenter of the outbreak with 44 cases and 10 deaths. In the state, King County has recorded 9 deaths, and Snohomish County has recorded 1 death. The country's 11th dead was recorded in California on Wednesday. The state's first death, an elderly cruise ship passenger in his 70s, died after being held in isolation. The widespread outbreak has now left public health officials in King County, which includes Seattle and is home to over 2.2 million people, urging local businesses to allow employees to telecommute for the next 3 weeks in an effort to curb the COVID-19 outbreak. We can see a bunch of photos here. We have a photo here. It says, medics wheel out a person on a stretcher from the Life Care Center of Kirkland on Wednesday as the death toll in Washington State climbed to 10. Another death was reported in California, bringing the nationwide death toll to 11. So here's what I want to point something out about these photos. We don't really see these photos over flu, do we? The death rate for flu being 0.1%, I've covered it, and coronavirus being 3.4%. I think, look, the president's downplaying it. I understand why he would do that, but I do not believe it. I think this is going to get a lot worse. There's some interesting points to be made. One of the things that Trump said was with all of these people who have mild cases and never report it, of course, it'll seem like the death rate is really high because they're not factoring in all of the people who got it and were totally fine. However, I think I'm not entirely sure. I think that's wrong. I think the CDC absolutely does factor in presumed cases, which does lend some credence to the idea that the mortality rate could be wrong if they're making assumptions about who has it and who doesn't. Keep in mind, that could mean the mortality rate could be way worse or it could be way lower. The Mail reports they are also recommending that higher risk groups, including people over 60, pregnant women, and people with underlying health conditions or weakened immune systems, stay home and away from large social gatherings. The latest recommendations, announced Wednesday, came after an employee at Amazon's Seattle headquarters was confirmed to have tested positive for coronavirus, potentially exposing some 50,000 others who work at the plant. Hours later, officials confirmed that an employee at Facebook's Stadium East office in Seattle had also tested positive. The company said the office will be closed until at least March 9th. North Shore School District, which serves 22,000 students across King County and Snohomish counties, announced late Wednesday it was closing all 36 of its schools after a parent or volunteer at Woodmore Elementary tested presumptive positive for coronavirus. Right now, we have 165 confirmed cases, 11 confirmed deaths. So here we can see this is the Seattle area, Kirkland over here. That's the Life Care Center, the nursing home, I believe. that had the outbreak, but now we're seeing it's infected the Seattle, Facebook Seattle and Amazon HQ. I think it's fair to say, look, Trump is right. A lot of people have this. It's mild. They go about their business. They probably stay home. They cough a bit, take some medicine. They're probably okay. That's true. But I also think it's fair to say it's probably much more widespread than anyone is giving it credit for right now. I want to point out how quite humorous I find it at all of the woke journalists who are like, it's no big deal. You're overreacting. It's just like the flu. And then as soon as Trump said the same thing, they went, Trump's downplaying the coronavirus. Oh, you know what, man? One of the things I'm sorry for those that are like not interested in politics who want to talk about this, but let me just point out. There are a ton of news stories that Donald Trump has seen and a day later repeated, and then the journalists do a 180 claiming he's wrong. That is the craziest thing to me. I can't tell you how many articles I saw where they were like, the coronavirus is nowhere near as bad as the flu. And then Trump comes out and says it's not as bad as the flu, and now they're yelling at him for it. So please, spare me. Let's just figure out what's going on. The Daily Mail reports North Shore Superintendent Michelle Reed issued a statement saying the schools will remain closed for up to 14 days. Well, they just made 22,000 kids really happy. While we continue to monitor the situation and health department recommendations. Reed said administrators plan to begin conducting classes online on Monday. Okay, now they're not so happy, but still probably happy. She noted that multiple individuals across the district are under self-quarantine after being exposed to the virus at a nursing home in the Seattle suburb of Kirkland, where the majority of the 39 Washington state cases have occurred. Authorities launched a federal investigation into the nursing home Life Care Center on Wednesday. Seema Verma, head for the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services on Wednesday, said the agency is sending inspectors to Life Care along with experts from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention to figure out what happened and determine whether the nursing home followed guidelines for preventing infections. Last April, the state fined Life Care $67,000 over infection control deficiencies following 2 flu outbreaks that affected 17 patients and staff. An unannounced follow-up inspection in June determined that Life Care had corrected the problems, Verma said. Health officials in North Carolina reported that a person from Wake County tested positive for the illness after visiting the nursing home. So now it's spreading state to state, of course. The patient's flight from the Seattle area to the Raleigh-Durham airport raised fears other passengers were exposed to the virus. Yes, they were, obviously. My understanding is we have the manifest. Now the trick is to go find them. That's what Robert Redfield of the CDC said. Life Care Center said on its website that it is screening employees for symptoms before they start work as they leave. The nursing home is prohibiting visits from residents' family members. Meanwhile, public officials in Washington are facing increased pressure to take more aggressive steps against the outbreak, including closing schools and canceling large events. While the state and Seattle have declared emergencies, giving leaders broad powers to suspend activities, they have not issued any orders to do so. We have encouraged people who are responsible for large gatherings to give consideration whether it really makes sense to carry those on right now, Governor Jay Inslee said. Right now, we are deferring to the judgment of these organizations. So we have please stay healthy, wash your hands, things like that. That's all pretty obvious. Well, some individuals, schools, and businesses have shut down. The governor said large-scale school closings have not been ordered because there are so many ramifications for families and businesses, especially for healthcare workers who might not be able to go to work because of childcare responsibilities. The state health department issued a notice on Twitter asking residents not to lick their mail-in ballots ahead of the primary on March 10th. Whether healthy or sick, please don't lick, they said. Meanwhile, King County Executive Dow Constantine announced it had purchased an 85-bed motel south of Seattle to house patients for recovery and isolation. Yikes, man. Look, when China started, it was kind of similar to this. They were saying, watch yourself, voluntary quarantines, and then the government cracked down heavily. We don't have the same capabilities in the United States because we're a freedom-loving people that doesn't have the right to go and weld people's doors shut like I don't want to say they welded them shut, but I know they barricaded people's doors shut. I think it's going to get bad. I think we're just not seeing it because it's being kept out of sight, out of mind. So I want to show you a couple more stories. This is a tweet from a local reporter. This is Genevieve Rom, Emmy Award winning from KATU News in Oregon. So it's not Seattle, but it's in Oregon. She said, honestly, I'm just wondering how many times they've refilled the shelves, nearly empty yet again, showing that while there are many products, it looks like disinfectant wipes and similar products are being bought up in mass. She said, and bleach, also a popular get. we can see that another shelf is completely empty, though for some reason they've left OxyClean. There is still some bleach. So someone responded, same on the North Coast, see my feed. It looks like people are absolutely panic buying, and you know what, man? If you've watched all of my videos on the coronavirus, you're probably tired of hearing it, but I'm going to say it again because it bears repeating, and it always will. Right now, in your area, it's probably fine to go get groceries and stock up. If you haven't done your grocery shopping, go do it. Don't all rush out at once. Take your time. Don't panic. But I'll tell you what, the coronavirus spread is probably worse than everyone realizes. It's probably infecting way more people than anyone realizes. And as soon as they announce the emergency in your state, that's when the shelves get stripped bare. So you don't want to panic. You just want to make sure you're being responsible and taking care of yourself while you have the opportunity to do so. Because here's where it gets scary. Now that I said that, here's the big update. Daily coronavirus cases outside of China are now 18 times higher than inside the worst hit nation where the outbreak began, as Beijing offers help by sending 250,000 face masks to Iran. China may or may not have control over this. I think it's fair to say, if it's true, they do have a control on this. It's because they're authoritarian, something we can't necessarily do. Well, I say necessarily, so let's keep our fingers crossed we don't have to enact authoritarian controls. The other issue is that they're authoritarians, meaning they're probably lying about what's happening. They've been lying the whole time. But for now, it seems like the coronavirus cases are 18 times higher outside of China. Is it possible that China is absolutely lying about how bad it is, and it only looks like it's 18 times worse outside of the country? Now, the World Health Organization said the stabilization in China is correct. I'm not convinced. I'm not going to believe them, man. Sorry. They're authoritarians. They lock people up and they lie about it. The Daily Mail says Beijing confirmed just 120 new cases yesterday, in the lowest daily toll since the crisis began to take hold in the middle of January. World Health Organization figures show 2,103 patients were struck down outside of China, with most recorded in Iran, South Korea, and Italy, but those are the places doing the tests. If it's true that China has controlled this, it stands to reason it's much worse than 18 times higher outside of China. The escalating crisis, which has seen 96,000 people infected across the world, has changed course dramatically in the past 2 weeks. Data shows the number of daily cases on February 19th, 2 weeks ago, was 17 times higher in China than the rest of the world combined. As China's outbreak has dramatically slowed in the last week, Beijing has now started to help other nations battling outbreaks of their own. Chinese health officials have already sent 250,000 face masks and 5,000 testing kits to Iran, which has recorded more than 3,500 cases and 107 deaths. Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian said China has sent the tests to Pakistan, Japan, and some African countries, as well as Iran. Zhao told a press conference, while fighting the epidemic at home, we will continue working with other sides and offer them assistance. China was ostracized by the world at the beginning of its outbreak, which emerged in Wuhan in Hubei province at the end of December. Countries around the world restricted travel to China. The UK still advises against all but essential travel to the mainland. Now, here's really bad news for the economy. We are seeing conferences get shut down. We are seeing offices get closed. I think it was Amazon or Facebook. I think Facebook said they're going to shut down their offices for a little while. Schools getting shut down. An airline, actually Flybe, I think it was. It's an airline service of some sort. They're in dire straits, if not completely destabilized. We're seeing furloughs at major airlines because people don't want to fly amid the coronavirus crisis. Even though the numbers are substantially less than the flu, the mortality rate is perceivably higher. I'll tell you this. It's possible that the total infection rate is much higher. But then at what point do we get, 30, if it was 34 times higher, then and the deaths were the same, then we would have around the correct amount, an equal amount of deaths relative to the flu. This is 35 times more deadly than the flu as far as we can tell right now. So I think it's pretty important that even though the total cases is low, we stay vigilant as possible. And that's why the governments are acting this way. They say China fears travelers could bring in cases of the infection, with 20 imported cases already confirmed from Italy and Iran. Several cities and provinces, including Beijing, have imposed a 14-day quarantine on people arriving from hard-hit countries. This week, China flew 146 citizens home from Iran just a month after governments rushed to evacuate their own citizens out of Wuhan. The number of new coronavirus cases reported outside of China exceeded those in the country for the first time on February 26th. So again, what we are seeing now in China, I want you to pay attention to, because it looks like we are getting close to hard quarantines here in the US. I don't want to say that's literally what's happening, but I've already shown you the story. They are asking everyone in King County work from home. This is soft quarantine period. This is the biggest number we have seen yet. Like 700 people in New York, that was not a big deal. A couple hundred people in Massachusetts, not a big deal. 2.2 million. I think we're getting dangerously close to the period where they say you must stay home. We're getting dangerously close to the period where the U.S. government needs to come out and start setting up checkpoints because the high mortality rate. Cases have since skyrocketed outside of China, with worsening outbreaks in South Korea, Iran, Italy, Japan, Germany, Spain, and France. More than 16,000 cases have now been recorded outside of China, including nearly 5,000 in Europe. A few weeks ago, Chinese officials were putting in calls to try and shore up overseas support as countries imposed travel bans. Not only that, people are not boarding these planes. Now, outgoing calls are to offer technical advice, sharing China's coronavirus fight through video conferences with the EU and other nations. State media reported that a manual offering advice on controlling the spread of the virus had been translated into Persian and made free to download. After scrambling with a huge shortage of medical equipment, China is now looking to export material. An industry ministry spokeswoman this week said China's production of hazmat suits now exceeds demand from Hubei province, where the virus first emerged. So if that's true, and they are sending masks out, it stands to reason they did contain this. Great news. There was a story I covered where an American company was producing face masks to come to America, and the Chinese government turned it around to take them because they needed them. Now they're saying they don't. Look, I think the authoritarian crackdown in China worked, but that's not what we want. I'm going to say it, man. Freedom before security, always. Let me be responsible for myself. I do not want a nanny state locking things down because they won't be able to do it effectively. But there's the big updates for now. I'll have more updates as they come, so stick around. Next segment will be coming up at 4 p.m. youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all there.